And now we're recording. So, what's up, nerds? Today we have Jeff Bosley. Um, he is a friend of the show, and we're just going to talk about nerd stuff. Jeff is also a former veteran, professional actor, all sorts of things. But yeah, let's tell everybody a little bit about yourself, Jeff.
That was enough.
That was enough.
Yeah. The short version that I always called it. This is back. This ages me a little bit, but you might remember it. But do you remember the True Hollywood Story? Do you remember that show? It was like on it was on VH1 for a bit. No, you wouldn't remember. God. But like that's how you know you made it is if you were on True Hollywood Story. But the sad thing is most of the time that ended with and he ended up dead in a gutter. Like so, like it wasn't a real good feel good show. But like I always had that was like my little
That was the thing you wanted.
manifesting thing. I'm like, the True Hollywood Story version. But then most of the time it ended up in horror. But my True Hollywood Story short version is, I grew up in Idaho, a very normal life and all that. To tie it into this, huge nerd, always watched way too many movies. Fortunately, my dad got me involved, or my parents got me involved in sports and all that. But at the end of the day, like, I was very fortunate. Dad is and was an ER doctor, but he was like a down to earth ER doctor. Like, we didn't have a Mercedes, we had a Suburban. So
Right.
like he was born and raised in Nebraska, so he didn't have that like doctor thing, but it still came with like a little bit of freedom. So like for Christmas, I got like the GI Joe Star aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
Whereas my friends got a GI Joe. But like growing up, so I loved that. Like I look back now, just got the chills just rethinking and telling you this. Is like, and my parents' place is, I have the original Millennium Falcon, not from the original three when they came out.
Yeah.
GI Joe, the aircraft carrier. So like always been that. But because I was raised by a doctor, I still had like this. To my dad's credit, he didn't like beat it into me, literally or metaphorically. But there was always this air of like academia and do these normal things. So it just kind of I just went off to school and college and did the quote unquote normal things. And
Yeah.
college
The,
was
the,
rough.
the quote unquote normal things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it was rough because I went to college because you're supposed to. I
Yeah.
didn't party or do anything fun. Yeah, I didn't party or do anything fun, but I went because I was supposed to. And like, I know some people that have muscled through college when they didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be there. I didn't drink or party, and no joke, right hand of God. I just remember watching Spider-Man. Like that's all I did in college. I didn't, and so college didn't go
Wait,
too
which,
well.
which Spider Man?
The original cartoon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is perfectly timed, but like this guy to cartoon, like
Yeah. The
old
OG.
day. Yeah, yeah.
Not Toby Maguire. We're talking about.
Yeah, no, this is the straight up card. Yeah, see, I'm 46, folks, so this is definitely there is some original. Like I from Batman '89, I actually had the Chuck Taylor Batman
Oh,
Chuck
that's cool.
Taylors they had, and before everything was re-released. But so yeah, anyway, I did the college thing for a while, beat that thing to death. I was at a private college, so that was a great thing that I just wasted all my scholarships. Came back to Idaho, played around in sports med and theater, got a little bit of love of theater, started with some buddies. This is around when 28 Days Later became famous. You and I have talked about that a little bit offline, and we started a little film company. We all saved up and got a Canon XL1, and we tried to tap into that nerd filmmaking thing, but the practical Jeff still's like, I got to do practical stuff. So like that's when I went and ran off and chased the least practical thing I could think of that still seemed practical because it was a paycheck, I guess. I went off and did the whole Army Special Forces thing, beat that to death. That beat me to death almost many times.
What do you think drove you to do that?
I always knew, like when I was a kid, like if I was to go back and interview myself, and I say this all the time, but I genuinely mean it. Like I hadn't really like evaluated the reality of when I said I wanted to be Rambo when I grew up. I was like, wait, does that mean I want to be Rambo in the movies or Rambo in the real world?
Right.
So
Right.
honestly, because I hadn't discriminated between film and real life, I kind of just was like, well, I better do this before I get too old. And I knew I wanted to do some sort of special operations. The Army Green Beret seemed a little more my style. I do
Well,
have pretty
and John Rambo, right? So
well, yeah, exactly. That's the thing. We only have Rambo, like we have Rambo and a couple deep cut people. We don't have a lot of SEALs have everything. They have all the media locked
Yeah,
down.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so that's why I went and did that. I was getting old, and I knew if I didn't try it, I would hate it. And I don't mean any disrespect to anybody that wasn't like a Green Beret, but I knew I didn't want to join the military and be like a radiology tech. Like I wanted to join the military to do the most military thing possible. So I hammered that out. It hammered me out. I was a firefighter after that because I could not let go of that, doing the practical thing. And then finally, what brings me kind of how we ended up meeting eventually is after the military, I kind of got my standard issue divorce, and like I had that big chunk of a life fallout, and that's when a bunch of my close friends and all that, they said,
So you're saying your DD-214 came with baggage?
came with you have to give her your dogs on your DD-214. She gets my divorce was a country song. Like I got to keep the truck, she got the dogs. Like it was straight up the most Idaho divorce ever. And I had like a moment of like I don't want to say weakness, but a moment of like less practical going on, and a whole bunch of friends said, this is the time you've always wanted to do the Hollywood thing, go for it. And I turned off my micromanaging OCD, planning my life, all of that, and just sold everything and moved to LA and lived in a car. Like I did the most cliche opposite thing I could possibly feed. Yeah,
like it's a country song. This whole party.
It is. Yeah. I took my bags, but I didn't move in a pickup. I had a Chrysler 300, so that was like the weirdest.
Oh wow.
Dichotomy of like the big tall white boy from like Idaho driving this gangster Chrysler 300, living in the back seat. Yeah, it was a very weird oxymoron of an existence, and I did that for about. The short version is I did that for just under 10 years, got enough of a career, quote unquote, going that I was paying my bills. I vowed when I moved there I was only going to act, not do bartender, personal training, like not 10 jobs and act. Like that was a weird ego thing.
You just wanted to focus on that one thing.
Yeah, and it came at a cost. Like there were times where I was like, literally, who's going to eat this week, me or my dog? Like it definitely came at a cost. But I honestly think that whole Green Beret lifestyle, it created a mental spectrum of suck that made me allow misery was a little less. It was the relative misery was more relative as the older broken down Green Beret. So I got enough of a career that I didn't have to live in LA because it definitely was killing my soul. I was chasing my dream and like a childhood dream, but it if you're not from LA and it's not your thing, it's a
different,
soul darkening, miserable experience. And so I was able to move to Georgia because that's like Hollywood 2.0. And I could afford. I was renting a tough shed for $1,000 a month in LA that was been retrofitted into a house.
Oh
for
wow!
a couple $100 more, I had got a giant, amazing, like not giant, but giant to me. I didn't need a 5-bedroom house, but there was one on the market in Noonan, Georgia, and I was like, all right, cool, I'll take it. And I was able to get that house for almost just a little over what I was paying for a tough shed in LA.
That's crazy.
So moved to Georgia, did the Hollywood 2.0 thing. I have a bunch of friends in the stunt industry, and I kind of relate more to the stunt folks because that's like they're kind of like the blue collar workers. As much as I love acting, but that was going okay for
the riggers and the set builders are all
100%. Yeah. Like I got in trouble one time for helping catering start putting like folding chairs away, and because of union work, they're like, you can't help do that. And I was like, good God, dude, this business. Like I love the artsy acting stuff. Like I'll crap on it and say, I'm not curing cancer. I do love it, but at the same time, it's like I do relate to less of the higher than thou attitudes, and so. Georgia was going good, and I have enough of a career again that I have, I have my management and my agents peppered around the country, and so I was able to. Now I chased a girl to Nebraska, and I live there with her, and so.
Chased a girl in Nebraska.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, another country song.
She kept leaving. She kept leaving all the states I kept chasing her to, and we finally cornered her in Nebraska.
Yeah, there's nowhere to run. I got you now. So that's the short version. Everybody. Like I dated one girl when I was a firefighter, and she'd it sounds like a lie, so like, oh, I was a Green Beret, I was a firefighter, I'm an actor, it's like, yeah, come on, dude, take it down a notch. That's some stolen valor, bro.
You didn't do that.
Yeah, I've done some Swiss Army knife of life for sure, but I keep the documents in my phone for if somebody tries to fact check me. I'm like,
Right,
here's my orders, and
right here.
because I would check them too. I'm like, you're full of shit, dude.
Yeah, you don't you don't have all those fucking things. Come on,
Yeah,
let's go.
I didn't do them
Um,
all for 20 years to be clear, but
yeah, but you did stints enough and
yeah,
everything.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think
stints.
I've earned at least a badge or two.
Oh yeah, for sure. Um, well, with all that being said, it's funny because like you said like you're a nerd and you had like Spider-Man and all these things growing up,
Yeah,
but who's your favorite or what's your favorite franchise or character or
yeah,
whatever it is? Like, what's the one thing in this kind of nerd realm, like
yeah.
character wise? What's your favorite?
It's evolved. Like I mean, you just saw like over how I start to relate to my own worst enemy because I look at stuff as from an outside looking in, like a consumer or a nerd or whatever, and that answer sometimes is conflicts with like what the nerd in me would love to do as an actor, because every nerd when they were kids they played pretend, so like I'm
Right.
like. So, but I have this weird like, well, Jeff, you couldn't play that because you're not character accurate, and I'm like, all right, take it down, Hollywood, just. But growing up and a big chunk of my life, not because it's cliche and the SEALs and Green Berets, but I've always related to like Frank Castle, the Punisher. Like I've always
Nice.
related to his black and white code. There's no debate. There's no, and then I go into casting and this is a whole nother path, but characters are drawn. I mean, anybody that's ever drawn or read a comic book, they're drawn roided out of their mind, like they're not
Oh
real,
yeah, they're
so like I
completely
love all
unreal.
these various portrayals, but at the end of the day I'm like, but I'm freaking 6'6", 260 pounds. I'm, Thomas Jane, like I'm like ah. So I have like a connection there. However, as I've gotten older and I look on things, I start to look at things in like a different way. As far as, I mean, I'm 46 now. Like when I first started thinking about the Punisher, I was younger and more like just kind of young and dumb. But now I look at like Thomas Wayne, in
Yeah.
like the Flashpoint paradox, like the pissed off dad whose son died, So I start to look at stuff like that. So I think it'd be a toss between Batman and Punisher. It would be like my biggest go-tos as far
Well,
as
Punisher's just the more violent Batman, right? So
I mean, I mean, yeah. Look at it. It's not a coincidence that they're very similar that way.
did you like the Punisher series on Netflix?
Jealous Jeff didn't watch it.
Jealous Jeff didn't watch it. Got
Yeah, and that's the catch 22 with this crap is I love this crap as a fan,
it. Right.
but I'm also I get, because I'm really super competitive, which is the antithesis of like, oh, we're all connected and we're friends, support your friends, but like I get really pissed off. I'm like, god dang it, of course they cast the famous guy. Not like I don't like John Bernthal, he crushes it. Like I did watch like episode 1 and I just remember a few scenes from that, but I get all jealous because me and some friends, actually this is a deep cut, me and my buddy Scott, who I'll reference a lot, before Daredevil was even rumored, or no, it had just started being rumored, like the first Daredevil, not this rebirth one that's coming out. So this is definitely before Punisher series was coming out. Scott and I, we tried to do this viral marketing bullcrap, because we know I'm not going to get famous enough to be, or I'm not famous enough to be automatically auditioned. Like that's just the way Hollywood is. Like
Right.
they want names, and I get that because I would want to make money too. But we're like, we got to find a gimmick, and so we had a whole Punisher fan film. We did all this viral crap in L.A. Like I chased a guy on like Hollywood Boulevard. We had a guy staged as Spider-Man, not one of the actual Spider-Man on Hollywood Boulevard. Where people do all the character stuff.
Yeah.
We had a guy as Spider-Man standing there, and then we had a guy on a motorcycle come riding into the crowd, rip his hood off, and take off down the sidewalk. And I come out of nowhere in my Punisher shirt, chasing him on like full foot sprinted. And people are like, "What the hell's just going on?" Like they're like, "Holy shit, the Punisher's real!" So we tried to do all that viral leaky crap, because we had heard that they were going to do Daredevil, and
Rumors.
then
Yeah.
the nerds in us, and Scott's one too, we're like, okay, I'm not going to play Daredevil. Of course, that makes no sense. But I was like, if we were forward thinking, ironically, like they're going to bring the Punisher in. So we actually started, we'd already shot, we'd planned and blocked. Fast forward, we had actually blocked that scene where the Punisher chains up Daredevil on that roof in that
Oh
famous
man.
scene. And
Oh.
yeah, so like we were all in. And so like that became a little like, I lost the Super Bowl. No, I don't want to watch football. So like
Did y'all post the fan film on YouTube?
we didn't know. Once they started kicking it off, we were like, this is now pointless, because we didn't
Ah.
want it to turn into the slippery slope of in the acting world to be known as just and I don't mean no disrespect to cosplay, but if a casting director goes, this is just a cosplayer at our audition, we
Uh-huh.
wanted to make it look like, okay, this guy's serious. He's been to acting schools. So it's a slippery slope because at the end of the day, I personally don't think there's a difference between, if you can act well and you're a cosplayer, F it, who cares?
Yeah, same thing, right? Same
Yeah,
thing.
so we stopped it because we're like, no, this just looks like a bunch of cosplayers, so we want to make sure we're taken seriously. So it got shelved while we have our images and some video, but yeah, so that was frustrating. But then as a vet, uh, it's hard because I love the comics, the Punisher comics.
Yeah.
As a vet, and I don't say this as an actor, it's a little PTSD for me. Like Frank is a little, and I'm like, and that's just a choice. So
Like Frank really hits home?
what's that?
Like Frank really just kind of hits home?
No, it's actually the other way around. I think his character, as far as based on what I see in the comics, is it's portrayed like the PTSD is like off the charts. Like
Oh
like
yeah.
the Frank I saw in the comics, he was still functional. Like he had, but at the same time, the series they got to have entertainment value. So anyway, no, that's my long answers. I didn't watch it. I want to. I really want to, but I'm so competitive, and everything I audition for, have a connection to, I become a little whiny baby, and
If you don't get it.
yeah, because they're major series that I want to see as a fan. Like Ahsoka, I auditioned for Ray Stevenson's character.
Oh man. Actually, you know what? To replace him, I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
unfortunately,
on
it's
paper, yeah, it's
unfortunate, but
rest in peace, and I love him. So, like, to be
yeah.
brutally clear, I'm not like a malicious a-hole. But
No,
yeah,
he did crush it, but
100%. That's the thing. As a fan, he crushed it. I love him as an actor. Ahsoka was awesome. He was perfect in it. It was perfect casting. But then the baby and me, like, like when they released the auditions, it was before they do what's called an open call, and that one was highly protected. So I nerded out and tried to figure it out. They had said they wanted somebody with a military bearing. They wanted somebody with tall, gray beard, and all these things. I was like, oh hell, this is me. And then so when I watched it, I was like, oh well, I would cast him over me too. Like it's a guaranteed ticket sales. So, but yeah, so then I didn't want to watch it because I was all butthurt about it. But I was like, the fan in me won because I love Ahsoka and I love the Clone Wars and I love all those spin-offs. So
yeah.
I watched it and I was very happy with it.
Yeah, but I mean, they do need a recast, so
Yes, I don't get me wrong. Like that one's a little icky because the guy died, but
It
like
is. I think to be his replacement, because he did kind of come out with like guns blazing, like just really crushed it, right? And you kind of go,
yeah,
man, to replace this man. I don't want to be that guy, but I kind of want to be that guy.
yeah.
But
I mean, don't get me wrong. If they gave me a shot, I wouldn't be like, no, no, no. I would 100%. But yeah, that's a great question of like, do you recast Chadwick Boseman, Ray Stevenson? Like those are big questions.
they're big. They are.
I mean, look at the Heath Ledger conundrum. Like he crushed it, and then now nobody, right, wrong, or indifferent, can uncompare.
Right.
After he passed. So
It's very true.
I'm glad I'm not in charge of those decisions. I wish I was in charge of the decisions that help my career, but I really wish I was not. I'm really glad I'm not in charge of those ones because
Yeah, because they do hold a lot of weight when doing these pictures and shows.
yeah,
It's really a big component to it. I mean,
yeah,
how many shows have we seen fail recently that have done really bad casting?
yeah. Oh yeah, that's a whole
Yeah,
another 4-hour
that's a
podcast.
whole other podcast we could do. But um,
Yeah.
so I have a question though too. I mean, I know like being in a Punisher and Batman, obviously too.
Yeah.
They're two of the coolest characters. I really love Spawn. He's one of my favorites. He's also kind of that vintage kind of vigilante. Really awesome. Yes, he's So do you think?
Oh wait, you said Spawn, not Venom.
Yeah, Spawn. Yeah, not Venom. I love Venom too.
Yeah, Spawn. There's a thing that needs to be remade.
Oh, Spawn. Yeah, I actually have the VHS sealed.
That's hilarious.
Over there. Just
See, that's an age one. Like I can't believe only a Spawn fan would go back to watch something that's definitely out of your age wheelhouse. Like
and also definitely not great. So yeah. there was an HBO Max series that they did on Spawn that was really really well done.
Fans will watch anything, whether it's shit or not. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Continue.
No, it's fine. But obviously, like we see ourselves in heroes sometimes, right? And that's kind of why we relate to them. Like my wife told me the other day, she goes, "You are like 70% Deadpool, 30% Captain America." And I was like, "Cool,
yeah,
so I'm Captain Deadpool. I need to make that a character."
That needs to be what is it? Marvel's What If.
Yeah, what
like
if,
a
yeah,
Captain Deadpool.
Captain Deadpool, that would be great.
I would watch
Uh,
that.
but basically, we see ourselves in characters. Do you think, any point of Frank Castle or Batman, like, maybe did it help you to know what you wanted to be? Like, did it help you wanna maybe look into special forces and be a
Yeah.
hero or firefighter type stuff, right?
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't take a like a PhD or psychologist to good or bad go. Well, this is painfully obvious. Jeff does these things or wants to do these things, but and it's not like I do it for resume chasing. But there is one of my best friends. She's tattooed on my arm. She said I have white knight syndrome, and she goes, you just like saving the day. And at the
Yeah.
time, she was telling me that's also why I have so many ex-girlfriends, not because I'm a man whore, but because I really like fixing things
Yeah.
and all that and helping and using the word big brother in a relationship scenario that's kind of messed up, but I like being like a hero or helper or savior or fixer, and I do like being a big brother. Like I'm very big brotherish to a bunch of people in my life, but I've always been that way, and 100% with the Green Beret thing. Like one of our mottos is, like unofficial mottos is like to help those who can't help themselves. You know, I love the Captain America quote from the movie, like I hate bullies. You know, I don't
Yeah.
care whose side, what side they're on. I've always been that way, and I genuinely, yeah, and so as a result, I'm drawn to the fantastical superheroes, like you know, it could be Superman, you know, the things that are a little far fetched, but it's no surprise I'm drawn to the characters that are literally human. You know, Frank
Right.
Castle, Bruce Wayne, or Thomas Wayne, like they literally have no superpowers. So I'm drawn to those, and I don't until you ask me that. Maybe I subconsciously had to be drawn to something that was real versus an alien or a radiation superpower. But yeah, I mean, there's no point in my life where I didn't have, not because I think I'm some selfless, amazing person. I'm kind of sometimes a selfish a hole, but I did like, you know,
Aren't we all? Aren't we all?
yeah. I mean, we all have our moments, and our, you know, I definitely have some boohoo moments. But yeah, whether it's you know firefighting or the Green Beret, yeah, and the characters I choose to relate to, or the ones, even one I'm pimping out now. This book series I'm reading is a character's name is Jim Powell, and he's 100% the same way. Like he's a normal guy in an abnormal circumstance, and
Right.
I love those, and I don't. Yeah, it does. Like I said, it doesn't take a psychologist, but it also creates probably just like a this weird standard because if something was completely unattainable, I will never know what it's like to be an alien with superpowers. So like
Right.
that might keep me healthy to never think I can be Superman, but where I'm
Right.
like, well, I don't know. Punisher's attainable, and so if I don't ever attain Punisher status, I suck.
Well, that's also the perfectionist in you, right? The one that's
Well, yeah, and
chasing that.
you're
Yeah, I
not.
can relate.
I was gonna say you can smell your own kind.
Yeah, I can totally relate.
Yeah,
Was there ever a moment in like this entire career and journey that you've had to where like maybe you dove back into the movies or the comic books or whatever, right?
yeah,
And did it really offer you some kind of comfort or escape to things that were going
yeah.
on?
Yes, unquestionably. I still, like I had just said, like sometimes I do get competitively butthurt. I don't know anybody that's been an athlete or played sports that maybe I'm just really not good at the like hug and think of the big picture. Like it probably does cause a little bit of my toxicity, but I should get rid of a little bit of it. But I've never been the guy who can go to the playoffs, lose the playoff, and then go to the championship game. My
Yeah,
brain doesn't work. I can't compute.
yeah,
I see my more respectfully said hippie friends. I see their perspective. I'm like, yeah, you're in a happier, healthier headspace. I do want that. I'm not against it, but there's something in my wiring that can't see that. So as a result, like I was saying, a lot of the shows that I would go to those for comfort, I've allowed to be tainted. But what I have found, especially, I would even say in the last 6 months, is I've just gone to the ones, especially ones that are older or ones that um, actually more older ones because I was like, I wasn't auditioning for this, so I can actually still enjoy it. You know, I posted the other day a scene from Tears of the Sun with Bruce Willis. I was
yeah,
like, awesome. I haven't been tainted by that. I didn't get a chance to audition for that. I remember watching it when I was just before I had enlisted, and I went and rewatched it after I posted that reel, and it had this. It had the what you're saying is like gave me, whether it was an escape or it gave me a little bit of motivation, it had a real effect without any tainted Hollywood actor wannabe bullcrap. And it was pure. And I try to keep those, whether I have hard copies or just whether I've saved them to stream. And a lot of them are just the ones almost like a BC and AD. So like
Yeah.
pre-Hollywood, after Hollywood. All my
Yeah.
pre-Hollywood ones, those still exist. Or if they're completely like, we brought up Deadpool and Wolverine. Like that was just fun as hell, and it gave me the chills because I just loved all the geek cameos.
Yeah.
Same with like the Spider-Man where all three showed up. I didn't care. Like I just enjoyed it and I got distracted, and that's all I care about, you know. And so they exist, but they have there's less novelty, I guess. Like they're more quality over quantity now. Like very specific movies and very specific genres that I can connect to and just turn my brain off. Like we were mocking Deadpool and Wolverine's plot. That one I could actually ironically go into and just turn off everything and just like a dumb kid just watch. It wasn't until after the fact I could destroy it and rip on the plot and rip all these things. But that one I could go in and enjoy. Whereas if I was to watch
Here's all the things you didn't do, but here's all the things you did well. You know.
Whereas if I would go watch the Punisher series, I would be a hypocrite, and it'd be so hard for me to turn off all these evaluations.
Yeah.
So I'm much more selective about the ones that you're referencing that just turn you off, remind you of that kid, whether they're as kids we were aspiring to be a superhero, or God forbid we were using it as an escape from some sort of trauma we were growing up around or whatever. I still have those movies as, you know, a 46-year-old adult. Like those. Snyder's Superman. I still connect to that like I'm a kid, and not because he's a comic book character. Yeah, that's an aspect, but I look at it more like why you know, Greeks and Romans had gods. You know, I'm not going against my God, but I still look at it and I'm inspired and distracted and motivated in the same way I was as a kid, and more of like thematically than specifically as a comic book character.
That's cool. This is a loaded question, I guess, but
yeah, I get winded. I tried not to drink too much coffee before we started. So.
There's quite a few, but out of all the franchises, obviously you said you love, you know, Batman and Punisher, right? But as far as movies, because we, you know, in the movie space, right, we're already there and you're in it, right? So as far as superhero movies, or like, you know, you're like any of the franchises, right? Like your Harry Potter, your Lord of the Rings, your Star Wars, your DC movies, your Marvel movies. What's that one kind of movie in this space, or trilogy or saga you could just, if you had to pick one, you could just watch over and over again?
The one I think that has the most consistent hits throughout, where you wouldn't have to like watch one and muscle through it, like to me would be the Indiana Jones series. There are a couple less thans, but they're
like the last one. But.
Yeah. Only the last one can make Crystal Skull look good. It's like, well done, sir. You actually gave us perspective. But like to me, it has the most consistent flow versus Spikes. You know, there's some amazing franchises that have they crush it, but then next thing you know, they make Batman and Robin. It's like, ah, shit. Then they bring it back with this, and then they fall
with the nipples, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like this, the up and down. I think to me, Indiana Jones has the most consistent wavelength, if you will, and that one to me taps into like just the childish enjoyment. You know, particularly obviously the first three for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny because that's totally out of left field. I didn't expect it. You know?
Oh, really?
because like for me, to be honest with you, like going through college, like the only DVDs I have, I didn't have Star Wars at that time, but I had the DVDs of the extended edition Lord of the Rings trilogy. Yeah. And so I would watch those every single day, every single night.
I would say those. That's two different answers. Is what I to answer your question personally, but then also the series that have the most consistent thing, and I would 100% say yes. For the Lord of the Rings trilogy, it stays at a 9.5 to a 10 throughout. Like it's a pretty good insulin. It doesn't have insulin spikes. Yeah.
No, but it's just the way. It's funny because I didn't think Indiana Jones, but you're right. I mean, I do love Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Back to the Future is kind of the same for me a little bit too. Like
that one didn't really. That one ended. Like that's actually, you just gave me the chills thing about that. Like that one ended as it should. Like the third one, it's anything that's a trilogy, you're running a risk. But
you run a risk.
it ended as great as a third one could, but it wasn't like a bomb, you know.
Right.
And then up until they started making, and this it's funny. Star Wars is such a weird timeline because it depends who you're talking to, the age they are, what they call what. Because
Yes.
now there's the prequels, there's the originals, and now there's this follow-ons that are. It's just a disaster. So growing up, my answer would have been until they made the prequels, it would 100% been Star Wars because I remember it would have been tied, I should say, between Star Wars and Indiana Jones because those are the ones that took me away. Like and
Like, just really took you out the world and put
yeah,
you in
yeah.
another
Like
one.
I remember this is definitely an age thing. I think it was.
But look, I'm 38. I'm not
I
that
know you're not
that
that.
age
Yeah,
either.
yeah. I was just. I know you also have a younger audience based on the people you've interviewed too.
Yeah.
God, I can't remember which one it was. It might have been Jedi. That I would have been old. Still, I would have gone. I know I went to one of the ones in the theater, and I remember I had a Han Solo blaster, and this is back when they made cool toy guns. Like I literally
Yeah.
right here have a Han
They,
Solo
they had the
blaster.
recoil and the noise
Yeah,
and
like I'm looking
everything.
at a
Yeah.
Han Solo blaster, and it says Star Tours because it was gimmicked off of the Star Tours ride from Disney.
Oh
It's
wow.
painted orange because of safety. Like this blaster was black. Like it was Han Solo black. It was awesome. But I took that to the movie theater, which of course you cannot take a gun to the movie theater anymore. But I remember I think it was Jedi. My poor mom. My dad remarried, so she was I was at 3, so I still call her mom. But so she married into this crazy nerd Rambo wannabe child, and so I, God bless her, but I took this gun to Jedi, and I remember shooting between the seats, and it made a sound like it was battery operated, and it made
Oh
blaster
man.
sounds. So I'm that asshole kid making blaster sounds in the middle of a movie, shooting at stormtroopers, you know. So like
Trying to help the Ewoks. Yeah.
exactly, like, and I've never been more connected to a movie than that moment. I'll never forget that
That's
moment.
cool.
But Indiana Jones, I binged it. I think it was during the whole, the whole virus timeline. But I remember rewatching that in order, with Doom first, and then watching them, and it still takes me away.
Yeah. It does.
Shia LaBeouf swinging on vines. That one was hard. I was like, oh, I'll just muscle through this one.
Yeah, let's just get through the Crystal Skull, and then it was like, because the Crystal Skull had all those big ants and stuff too, and then
Yeah,
and then it was
and
like,
it was weird because Lucas crushed his goal with the first 3 of like having serialized adventure movies or
yeah.
he turned serialized adventure Saturday mornings into just 3 movies.
Well, and it's interesting how that worked because like those movies were, the whole Lucas and Spielberg thing is always a really cool thing to
Yeah.
understand. It's funny how like best friends or just people that become best friends will like, help
Yes.
each other and stuff.
Yes.
And I wouldn't have picked anyone other than Steven to do those movies,
Yes.
but it's funny how that works because like I know you probably play video games too, right? And
Yeah.
so
Not as much. Like that's my
yeah,
one weakness, to be honest.
what I will say is like there's been so many video games that aren't Indiana Jones that are definitely inspired by it. Uncharted
Really?
series, the
Oh yeah, okay.
Tomb
I
Raider
know enough.
series,
Yeah.
and stuff like that, right? So, but like now they're coming out with like an actual like Indiana Jones video game, like
I
first
can't believe they
person,
didn't
like
do that.
and that's what I'm saying. Like as like you're saying these things, I'm like I can't believe they didn't. Like they had some Indiana Jones games
Yeah.
before, but it was like
But
back in
now
those
in the
days.
world building they can make with the
Yeah,
processors, like they can't. Well, knock on wood, they can't fail because in Indiana
yeah.
Jones,
Well, yeah.
like
I'm actually gonna do it because
this this one, if it was like one dimensional Resident Evil 1 Indiana Jones, it'd be cool. But the way things are now, like
well, and that's what they've made before the kind of side scroll things. Before.
yeah. This is
But, like,
the bar is high right now.
Yeah, this bar is high. It's first person. It's like they
That
did
could
really
actually
well.
be really cool.
So it could be really cool.
But it's weird. It's weird because the audience has maybe Crystal Skull, but also Dial of whatnot. It's weird because the people that are going to appreciate the amazing games didn't watch the original Indiana Jones, or have they maybe never seen it. So it's like a weird. Who's their audience?
Well, see,
Like
and this is a good point I bring up to most people, and I think you get it too. Like, and you said it with Star Wars, it's the generational piece, right? And I tell people this all the time. The beauty of Disney and what Disney understands that most consumers don't is they understand generational
Yes.
growth and
Yeah.
generational and capitalizing on that
Yeah.
that consumer. Walt Disney himself said that I'm appealing to the parents because they're the one that buy the tickets to bring the kids in the park.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not just for kids.
Yeah.
But if you look at like my sons, I'm 38, but my sons are in high school and my daughter's in college, right?
Good grief, dude.
My youngest son, I grew up on the prequels because that's what
Yeah.
I grew up on the re-release of the original in theaters, right?
Yes.
And then I watched those VHS tapes so much, my mom said they started to like
Yeah.
fall apart.
Yeah.
because all the behind the scenes was my thing
Yeah,
before
same.
and so then the prequels came out, and I actually liked episode 1 and 2, and I thought they were cool, you know.
Yeah.
And then when I was a senior, I left, came to Georgia. That's when episode 3 came out. We went to the midnight. I was the first time I
Yeah.
go to a movie by myself
Yep.
for like a first
Yeah,
premiere.
I
I
did
was
the
like,
theater prequels
yeah.
camping thing 100%. I
But
was
then
in
like
college.
my youngest son, his introduction to Star Wars was actually the Clone Wars animated series,
Yeah,
and I had never seen it.
that's
And
amazing.
he kept telling me over and over and over again how much Anakin is just his favorite Jedi. He's the best
You're
Jedi
like, if
ever.
you only knew where I started with
Yeah.
Anakin.
I'm like, yeah, and right, exactly, kind of same thing. And I'm like, then I went and watched the Clone Wars. I'm like, oh my god, this is actually really freaking good.
Yeah.
It's actually very good.
Yeah.
And that's what, to your point, like you're saying, the people that are gonna watch, or play this Indiana Jones video game probably haven't even seen Temple of Doom
Yeah.
or at all. No,
Yeah.
no one knows the Kalima.
Yeah,
Like that was
exactly.
something we
Kalima
used to do all
Shakti
the
Day.
time. Yeah. We used to do that just for fun.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because there are all these generational pieces to all these
Yeah.
storytelling things, and it's like there's people watching Rings of Power right now that probably never seen the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which
That's
why
a
not?
fact. Yeah.
Which
Yeah, I you know this, but for reference for the story, the VA will give me a paycheck to go back to school, and out of all the college I have hundreds of credits. I should have a PhD, but I have no degree. Like I just beat the college horse to death. But the college degree I have the most credits in when I transferred was my theater degree. So I was like, well, let's get this over with. Like I just want to get something finished. I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoy it, but I went back to like paint more of a dichotomous picture, like the former Green Beret, tall 46-year-old tattoo muscled, angry at the world, jaded actor wannabe guy going into a theater program with a bunch of 20-year-olds. I love them all; they're great, but we couldn't be more polar opposites,
right,
as far
yeah,
as all sorts of things. We all combine when we do our active artsy fartsy stuff. Great. But like we were literally having the discussion of Lord of the Rings because I had referenced the reason I didn't watch Rings of Power is I auditioned for one of the main guys in it. So that was burned for me before I even found out it was bad. So it worked out. But I was talking to him about it. I was like, oh, I couldn't watch it because I'm all butthurt about not getting what I've since forgotten the name of the character. And he's like, what? And I was like, yeah, it's kind of like Aragorn. He goes, wait, who's Aragorn? I was like, what? How can you not know who Aragorn is? He goes, I wasn't out when I was whatever. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, your introduction to the Lord of the Rings is Rings of Power?
and you're like,
I was like, but it's so funny because it is so relative because somebody like it was, Clone Wars, when something is so big like Lord of the Rings is becoming and has all these side stories, but Star Wars is a brilliant example of it's not linear. There's side stories on side stories on side stories.
yeah,
Where there's no way to make all of those win in a connected way. So that's why somebody that was born during the prequels, if that's their introduction, that's their reference point. So they're going to think it's amazing. But then if they go and watch my originals, your originals / re-releases, they're like, oh, the special effects in this are crap. This is stupid. And they're not wrong per se, but and like Betty and I just watched Alien last night, and I was like, God,
oh man,
it's amazing. But I was like,
yeah,
this is really slow. I was like, the
is.
first 3/4 of it is just like waiting,
Yeah, I actually have the whole I buy everything digital, but I love having physical copies.
Same.
But I have every Alien movie on Apple TV, and my son and I were watching them. He's like, Dad, this is pretty bad.
Yeah, I felt bad. I felt bad for her.
But just wait, because like I actually really enjoyed Prometheus. I did.
I did too.
I
like the world building. Like I can turn off and be a sucker for world building or prequels or stories that connect.
Like showing the engineers getting that story kind of. I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
this is interesting.
Yeah,
and I pretty much love everything Ridley Scott does. That's just kind of what typically happens.
And I can turn into a big dumb idiot. Like the minute they explained the ship that you see in Alien for like maybe 10 minutes when they explained that, was it in Prometheus or? Yeah, I think that was where it was explained with the engineers. That was an engineer that we saw in Alien. To me, I was like, payoff. I didn't need I was like, you could end it there because like when it comes to cameos or those little Easter eggs, my critical brain just turns off.
It just goes down, right?
I'm like, oh yeah.
It's like you connected that,
and I turned into a moron. Like my critical brain. Then I got to go back and go, yeah, okay, this wasn't as good, but. 9 times out of 10, I'm like, I can turn off the brain and just be dumb enjoyment. But
that's the thing. Sometimes you just gotta turn it off. But That's my next thing I was gonna ask you about too. Was there ever a point in time in your life and career where like you
Yeah.
ever felt like you were too old for to be into like Batman or nerd stuff, or had like I mean like you just pulled like three figures off the shelf,
Yeah.
right? Like, have you ever felt like
I
I'm
literally,
full for this
I,
shit?
yeah, I hate when people say literally. I'm using it appropriately here, I think, but I literally think that off and on daily because I'll find myself in my inner monologue when I see something on the news or social media, and I'll say, I'll roll my eyes and say, for God's sake, act your age,
Yeah,
But I'm like, then I think to myself, I'm playing pretend. I want to play pretend for a living, so and then I go, well, why is that deemed childish? At what point? And then I get, yeah, it's obviously this is a very stuttery answer because I was like, well, I don't want some. There is a cringe factor for me. I do my best because I do some weird stuff to not. I'll judge, but I'll try not to act out on it. But when I see people, quote unquote, not act their age to the extremes, like I'll call this dude straight out. I don't know his name, thank God. But there's like this Green Beret on TikTok or whatever. He is probably in his 50s or 60s, silver hair, and does TikTok dances. He seems like a good dude, but I judge the hell out of him. Like I roll my eyes. I'm like, dare how? And he's probably monetized and making a lot of money doing. Like he crushes it, and I hate it, and it makes me roll my eyes. I'm not going to try and hit him with my car if I ever see him. I can.
yeah,
I'll judge, but not act. And so I'm like, I go like to me when it comes to the extremes, I do get a little eye rolly, judgy. But I've as of late, so I don't have an answer for you. As of late, I've been like, if it makes you happy, like when did that parameter become at 13 you can't like this, it's a weird new world where uh like I remember especially during I always played video games when I had surgery in the military because that was the time I'd have the most downtime. And since I wasn't a big gamer, that's kind of where I would play catch up. So I remember, I think it was Dead Space for one of my
oh
surgeries.
man, yeah,
Yeah, and I just
yeah.
I basically binged it because I was so behind. It was kind of
It's
nice. I could play
it's like
like
an alien game with
yeah, yeah,
laser cutters, you know?
exactly. And so I would binge those, but there was always I remember going at the time because this is oh god 2000 2001ish at this point maybe where if there was a dude at home playing video games as long as I was, he was a lazy piece of crap. Whereas
Right,
now there's people literally getting paid
60 grand a
for
week.
people to watch them do that.
Yeah,
So it's relative. I still don't get it in my little slowly developing old man get off my lawn brain, but I'm also trying to de-judge it a little bit because why is one guy going fishing and playing the retirement game? Why is that deemed as okay? But if for some reason he collects, collectibles or toys, if you know what somebody would say, where is this weird line of delineation?
yeah.
So I don't like self judge or like self deprecate. If I had more money, I would have your basement. I would
All
have the
kind of
so
collectibles.
yeah. So it's so that's the thing is I mean the fact you saw like every Halloween. To Betty's credit, she's a similar headspace.
Yeah, you guys do
We
some amazing things on Halloween. It's so
yeah, I
cool.
was really proud of that one. But I was like, holy shit, I'm 46 years old and we're dressing up as Batman and Catwoman.
But it was so good. And
It
then
did.
and James Gunn your
It did.
story,
Yeah,
right?
I was really proud of that. Yeah, that's a nice drop. But to your answer, 10 years ago, I probably would have like rolled my eyes and gone, oh, act your age. Like,
Yeah.
so at the same, but it gave Betty and I something fun to do. It was creative. So why is, if somebody sits down with a canvas and acrylic and that's all artsy fartsy and they can do that till their 80s, but
Why can't I take a photo?
why can't Betty and I make this awesome photo shoot that's also quote unquote artistic, artsy fartsy and creative,
Yeah, I thought about making that the cover of the podcast because it's so damn good.
Yeah, to go for it, man.
Dude,
I'm
it's
proud of
so
that one.
cool.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. We don't dress up for Halloween. We just do something for social media, get undressed, and go watch TV.
yeah, look, hey, but see, like that's so when I started this, the whole idea was like the whole never grow up thing, right?
Yeah,
And
and that's how it should be.
the way that you preface that, because I mean, I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of guys in the comments sometimes be like, okay, whatever, grow up, whatever, like, stop like
Yeah,
beating down and stuff. It's like, dude, if you only knew like all the SF guys I know that are all freaking nerds,
yeah,
like you,
yeah.
you
And
would,
I will
and
fight that. Like the macho thing. I get alpha type A, save the world. Crush skulls for bad guys, but I also, and you know this more than more than most actually from some of our conversations. Like if you don't if you kind of mute that stuff, that shit that makes you happy, whether it's never growing up, that finds a way. And I'm a very black and white science guy, but I can't quantify it, but that stuff somehow finds a way to darken your soul.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, if
Yep.
okay, if wearing people's skin makes you happy, okay, we need to talk
We need to talk
psychological,
some a little bit. Yeah.
but if playing games and collecting collectibles makes you a happier person, you treat your wife better, you're not taking away family time, or you're enhancing family time, or you, I mean, that's a whole long hippie talk, but the short thing is, like, if you're happy doing something, it's just only going to fulfill your life.
Right.
And I
And
can
if you're
say
happy
that,
doing it and make money, then get
yeah,
money.
and I can say that from conversations you and I have had where I allowed myself to kind of let that die.
Yeah.
And I can say that from like the outside looking in. I'm like, oh, I want what I see other people have, as far as like not darkening that, playing the macho card, and I'm like, just shut up, you know?
Yeah. You
Yeah,
almost
those.
want to shut that voice up in your head.
Yeah,
Is
so
that kind of what you did? You just kind of said, you know what, fuck it, like I like this shit.
it was. Yeah, it was more like it was honestly, and it sounds like I'm trying to blame Hollywood, but it was more the battle between. We referenced him earlier, like it's like I'm the unknown Henry Cavill. Like, when you're playing the game so much before you're quote unquote discovered, it really has a way to, like, you hear about, like, think about a mechanic that loves souping up cars. The minute he starts to work as a mechanic at a shop, he like loses his love for working on cars, or he drives
Yeah.
a piece of crap, because it takes the love away from it. So, like, Henry Cavill is a great somebody that I look up to, because he's both, but he can be both now that he's quote unquote made it. Whereas
Right.
when you're struggling and trying to be that, you have to play. As much as I hate the Hollywood game, I always try to, like, spin it and go, I'll play their game and I'll kill them at their own rules, even though I hate their rules. So I'm trying to spin it a little bit and be a little bit more defiant and more optimistic, ironically. But I allowed that more to, like, to kind of ruin my enjoyment of it, because the business was, I allowed it to be so crushing on that inner child, or that inner nerd of like, cool, yeah, it'd be great to be all, never grow up or collect toys or watch
Yeah.
videos, but I was like, it doesn't pay the bills, or I am sucking, or no casting director gives a crap if I do this, so I got so this is one of the few businesses where, frustratingly, as much as people say, make your own content or make your own movies, you still, I say this hopefully relatively objectively, not in a bad mood, but you still are relying on other people.
Yes.
I could iPhone movie all day long. Yeah, it could look cool, but Warner Brothers isn't going to produce it. I still need other people, and this is the first business where to have so much in other people's hands, I allowed it to kill that inner kid for sure.
Yeah. And it's unfortunately that's sad. It's just like someone constantly stepping on your dream until it gets,
100%. Yeah.
like an
Yeah.
abusive relationship. You're kind of like, I don't want it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. It kills it. And I mean, again, it depends if you allow it. That's the kind of the hippie answer, and I agree with.
Right.
But, like, the whole Green Beret or firefighting, or whatever, the kid dream fueled me through the obstacles and difficulties, whereas here the kid dream, like, fuels it, but it doesn't help you at all. Like the fuel of the Green Beret childish, like, I'm going to do this at all costs dream thing, it would help me literally do a physical feat. Whereas I can be, oh, this is my dream as a kid, and it doesn't all of a sudden make my phone ring from a casting director. Like, there's
Right.
no quantity of childhood dream I can put out to the universe that makes Snyder call me, and I allowed that to really kill it. But then I'm getting older and moving, and definitely getting out of LA, and whether it was COVID or not, but just, we've all had that big couple years of self reflection.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, this is unsustainable for sure. So I have been like, F it, this makes me happy, because I'm not allowed a lot. I haven't allowed so much to let me be happy. So
Yeah.
I'm in this space. This is a really long, deep, like, downer answer, but I haven't allowed myself to find those moments of, like, be happy, because life is short, and all that
Yeah.
crap.
It's, I gave you some advice somebody gave me, and it was hard for me to do this. It was really, really hard. I couldn't even say the word.
Oh, great.
And he said, and this is a religious reference, but he said, what does God give you? And I was like, I have no idea. And he said, it starts with a G. And I was like, I have no idea. And I sat on the table for 45 minutes trying to figure out what that word was. And I couldn't do it. And so he finally had to tell me to give yourself grace.
I was going to say grace. Dang it. I should have said it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had to learn that because if you get wrapped up in this whole perfectionist piece of yourself, and you
Yeah.
hit this point where you're just like, man, like
Yeah.
it's the difference between the person that hits their foot on the table and goes, oh man, that hurt, and then the other person that hits their foot on the table and goes, you stupid fucking idiot.
Yeah.
Like that was
I'm the
yeah, I'm
latter.
I'm the second one too, right? So, like,
Yeah.
misery loves company, right? So I mean, like
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong though.
it's but and I think that's what you get so kind of self-destructive a little bit, and I think that's where like I just hit this point where I'm like, you know what, if we want to do something, we'll just do it ourselves, and I'll find
Yeah.
some people that want to do it, and I think that's where I don't know if you want to speak to this, but I thought about just really quickly because
Yeah.
a lot of people don't understand the industry part of that part that there's
Yeah.
this whole piece and this whole juggernaut of the industry. And since I do commercials, we do stuff for film, we do all different types of things in
Yeah.
this agency that I work at. But like basically, so many people want all the reward but none of the risk,
Yeah.
and they don't understand like when this studio is investing 200 million or 50 million or whatever it is into your project, they're assuming all the risk and they're promoting all the stuff for your story
Yeah.
to get it out to people. You're using them as a publisher, as a producer to get things out to people so they
Yeah.
watch it, they make money, you make a percentage. But so many people nowadays are like, well, I just like I'm a writer and I want all this extra money and all this other stuff. It's
Yeah.
like, cool. So you're okay, but you're being paid for that. You were paid $1 million to write the story,
Yeah.
but you also want the profit of the okay, cool, that's fine. So what if the studio said, we'll pay you, but then if it fails, we're going to take money from you?
Yeah.
That would shift the conversation completely because I
Yeah.
believe in artists and I believe in giving artists as much money as possible and
Yeah.
really nurturing that creativity and imagination. But I
Yeah.
really do think people lose sight of that. What do you say to that?
I think, well, and I think as you were talking, I couldn't agree more. A big thing is there will never be a day where art and business merge.
No.
By
Well,
definition, they're,
here. I'm
yeah.
trying to do it, but
I mean, they'll be like, the Venn diagram,
yeah,
that whole science thing. There'll be a point where they get dang close, but by design,
opposite.
they're apples and oranges.
Yep.
So like the most overlap in a Venn diagram, that's for sure a thing. I hope, but I think, but by definition or by design, they're not. Art putting like you're literally subjecting or putting a subjective spin on something that's, or you're putting an objective thing
Objective thing.
on
Yeah.
something subjective. You're putting a price on art. The very fact that conversation happens when you sell a painting or a movie or whatever, you're putting a value on something that
Right.
technically has no value. So that's a weird conundrum that just infuriates me.
Yeah, because how many movies have cost 500 million recently and only made
Yeah,
100?
and they look like crap. And then and so there's I have a slew of things, and I'll actually try to be more succinct than usual. But you'll hear that, and I basically will steal when Matt Damon was on Hot Ones, that wing eating show on
Oh yeah.
YouTube. I always refer that to it because he said it so eloquently. But the guy basically asked him, explain why are movies so expensive or so risky, or why does everything have to have this huge profit? Like you said, the studio takes all this risk, and if they're going to put a $200 million movie. And he had a beautiful point of, back in the day when there was only a theatrical release and DVDs, the DVD was essentially a second theatrical release. So
Right.
whatever they made in the theater, they'd essentially double it. So that's why you could make quote unquote riskier movies, because the risk. But now that it's straight to streaming or DVD or whatever, they're like, they need guarantees. So it makes everything wider now. So on the one end, studios need it to be a $200 million guaranteed income, or if they're going to spend $200 million, they also need to be guaranteed it's going to make $400 million.
Right.
How
And
do you?
yeah.
There's no.
How do you guarantee? You
The
can't
only
guarantee
way you
anything.
guarantee that is to put the rock in it and a lot of explosions. And I say that kind of bitter, but I'm also not wrong.
Not wrong.
Look
No.
at any movies that come out, and I will, like I said, I will watch some stupid stuff. I'll watch some popcorn eating explosion, turn your brain off stuff. I love them all. But when was the last time you saw a Mystic River, a Godfather, a Rocky, any of these story-driven things? Those are so few and far between, and they're not going to be made. And so since those aren't
Yeah.
getting made, that extreme is getting more and more wide. So now it has to be Marvel Endgame or whatever. What's the biggest one that just came out now? It was like hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm brain farting. So that's that extreme. But because there's now that wide, empty, vast space of nothingness, like you're saying, guys like you or I want to go do your own thing or whatever, it's like that's cool, but now that journey across that desert is even
Even wider.
wider now.
Yeah.
So it's like neither. I will never disagree with do your own stuff, and we said it. I don't want to be a hypocrite. Like Scott and I are always trying to do stuff. They're always trying. He sells scripts and all that. But now because of that width, Scott can write an amazing script. You can write an amazing script, and it's I want to live in a world where you and I can make that with
Cool.
you know, but a red camera because like it
Yeah.
just hundreds of thousands of dollars, just for the freaking camera, and it's like, all right, well now we need to play the game of the people that have the money, or lessen your standard because that's all you can afford, and so that's the thing I think is really hard for people to see or without
Well,
experience.
it does take a village because like you brought up some really good
Yes.
points, right? So like, okay, for me, like, yeah, I love Rocky, right? I really do. I love Rocky. I love Sylvester Stallone's story even too. Like
Yeah,
how
it's
he
a
kind of
perfect
did
story.
that, right?
Well, I mean,
If
look
you,
right here.
if you yeah, if you look at Rocky and look at Deadpool, the first one, right? Um,
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds was Deadpool before this Deadpool movie came out,
Yeah.
and in a really crappy way. But he got a group of people together. They made a really cool reel.
Yeah.
They virally
Leaked it.
leaked it,
Yep.
right? And then they got picked up.
Yeah.
But I think that's what the industry's missing. Like, you might have Scott, but like it's like, man, if you could just find like someone to do some cool poster art.
You need one gimmick.
But you need more than two people. You need like a VFX guy that's going, hey, I believe in this. You need,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
a writer that goes, I believe in this. Some
Yeah.
actors that say, I believe in this. You need a
Yeah.
creative director that goes, okay, here's a marketing, how we can make
Yeah.
it look and sell it to look real. Like you kind of need that whole group, and I think that's just what's kind of missing sometimes. It's just that
Yeah.
like Ryan Reynolds had a group of people. I guarantee you, maybe they put some money up front,
Yeah.
but at the same time, everybody that did that project believed in it and did it together.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I get in a weird and it sounds negative, and I don't want it to actually for once, but I get in a weird defensive thing of like, of course Ryan Reynolds could do something that leaked and make. I mean that just that whole VFX, all the footage, since it was one big long VFX fan film basically. You and I couldn't afford that.
There's no way.
So of course, so it's a great story and it's inspiring, and I'm not honestly shitting on it, but only Ryan Reynolds could have done that. It at Ryan Reynolds' state in his career. Ryan Reynolds pre Van Wilder, or even after Van Wilder,
or after Green Lantern.
Yeah, or after Green Lantern, so it's kind of like those stories are inspiring, but I'm like it sounds so jaded and boo-hooey, but it's not. It's Ryan Reynolds that had this story. Like when I hear about The Rock and he's like, I only have $7, I'm like, I don't relate to you anymore. Like that's not you anymore. You're no longer that guy. So like if they go like Ryan Reynolds struggled to release Deadpool, I'm like, his struggle to release Deadpool isn't
it's not the same struggle as
you struggled. Yeah.
Or Sly doing Rocky.
And that's the one thing I always say, and I mean this more of an educational, less of a whiny way, for when people, not you, but others ask or say that. They're like, Stallone, he said his script and he said, only if you hire me. I'm like, that's amazing. That's an awesome story that he said, only if you cast me. Those days are gone. Like the studio's like, no, we're not going to cast you because you're unknown. We need this to make fourfold what we put into it. It has to be The Rock or, Tom Holland. It's got to be. And I get from a business standpoint, like what person would run a business that doesn't profit? That's just duh.
Yeah.
So like, why would you not pick the product that's going to make you the most return? Duh. But sadly, because it's art and I'm a whiny wannabe actor or creator or somebody that's, you, me, Scott, or whomever is trying to create from the bottom, working our way up, I get a little butthurt. And it's like, come on, man. Like, I want the Stallone stories to be true, but those big gimmicky risks, like you said, take a village now to compensate for the fact they can't just be Stallone stepping on a thing. It's got to be Stallone, or it's got to be Reynolds, a little bit of his popularity, a lot of his income, all of his friends he's made up until Deadpool. The fact, obviously Deadpool and Wolverine, he and Jackman meeting at the failed one, so like their struggle stories of gimmicks are so much different than like ours.
That's a good point. It's like, and I think you approach it in a good way. It's not.
But you're in I get negative about that. Like I get all pissy and like arrogant, or not arrogant, whiny.
Whiny.
You have a positive spin on it, which is good because that's how it needs to be. Or like if you just think about the doom and gloom and dread, you'll be an angry, pissed off, jaded guy like me. Because
and that's what that's what happens. So we talked about this a little bit earlier too, and we'll get a little deep,
Yeah.
again. But that's the whole purpose of this is that kind of, sometimes self-inflicted trauma, right? That kind of stuff that you actually end up, kind of scarring yourself, and you hit that point where
Oh yeah.
as many times as you go, man, I suck or this sucks or I can't do this,
Yeah.
whatever. That's gonna stay somewhere in the body,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And it's gonna lock up and stuff.
Self
And
harm is way more
it's
damaging than outer harm.
oh, for sure. And I think, and the longer you keep that kind of stuff in, the harder it is to get rid of it. And
Yeah.
I've done that. I know you've done that.
Yeah.
Still
Yeah.
do it. I know you still do it, right? It's that's kind of what changed my philosophy though. Is just, I work out, you work out, I eat really clean. I know you do. Like it's taking care of your body is a big component to a
Yeah.
lot of this stuff. And I
Yeah.
think that's where like that internalizing, just like that constant negativity. I think that's where like a lot of stuff happens, and I think that's
Yeah.
where a lot of people get this whole jaded look on everything. And it kind of, and instead of making me angry, it kind of makes me sad. Like
Yeah.
I kind of hit this point where I'm like, man, people don't think like me anymore.
Yeah.
People don't dream anymore. And I
Yeah.
think people forget the American dream is not about making money. That was
Yeah.
never the American dream. The American dream was not about get a job, go to corporate America,
Oh God, yes.
retire.
Yeah.
The American dream was actually you can do anything you
Just
want,
freedom to do. Yeah.
right?
1,000,000,000%.
And like, because I don't plan on retiring. I
Yeah.
don't. I want to keep doing this until
Yeah.
they put me in the ground, right? And so that's kind of the philosophy and outlook I've had. Because I've had
Yeah.
so many more detrimental times than I had positive times.
Yeah.
It's time to make some positive times, and I think that's where podcasts like this and having these conversations is going to be a start to a good thing. I
Yes.
think.
1,000,000,000%. And I think that's, yeah, it sucks because, and I always say, and I've still said this is one of my truisms that have survived some of my pissier times is that I just want to be able to pay my bills doing it,
Yeah.
like at the end of the day, or not be hindered by,
Right.
and like that sweet spot, and of I don't want to, I don't wish on you or Scott to have to be Ryan Reynolds to make a fan film. Like
Yeah.
I pimped it out all the time, but actually, speaking of the Deadpool thing, I might have actually, or a guy I know might have done the exact same thing, leaked the Reacher fan film we made when I was in the running to play Jack Reacher. That guy literally
Maybe.
goes, yeah, that guy literally goes, hey, it worked for Deadpool, let's do the same thing. So the film was leaked, and 6 minutes cost that dude $10,000+. Like, it shouldn't be that way, and
No.
it shows. I mean, I'm not arrogantly, but like the footage is because we used a red. I mean, it shows, and I probably not now as much mathematically, but that lingered for a long time in my pocketbook. Where like Ryan Reynolds can clean out his couch for his Deadpool VFX thing, and so I want people to not have to, like, what's that country song, like money can't buy you happiness, but it can buy you a boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like the times and my, like, the little inner child, and I always say hippie like I'm being derogatory, but I actually use that as a reference point for things I strive for. So a lot of times it could be, especially from guys in my,
Well, to be honest, hippies are more positive than most people. Right?
that's 100%.
Right.
But dudes in my world that they have some sort of grunt style T-shirt on and they say hippie, normally it's a little combative.
Right. Oh no,
So,
no, yeah, for sure.
I don't mean it that way. I mean it actually in an aspiring way. But like, I'll have the little inner hippie in me and be like, I list of people, if I quote unquote make it and have, I just want to help people. I just want to buy shit for people. And if Scott says something, I'm like, here, go have fun. Like, because like you said, the American dream wasn't to make money, but it gets in this weird relativity space of what people considered getting by versus struggling versus just surviving. You'll hear some Hollywood celebrity going, oh, I'm not going to make it. Like, you still have 2 houses, or whatever.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
But at the same time, and then you hear people during like the Dust Bowl, and it's like, well, okay, that is.
But you also hear the stories about the people that made it and have all the money in the world, and like, I actually,
they're miserable.
I did this practice, and maybe this is really good to say, for you and also
Yeah.
just for the podcast. Like, there's a practice I've been sharing with a lot of friends that I kind of did for myself. I think I made it up, to be honest with you. I said, okay, if tomorrow someone came and knocked on my door and gave me all the money in the world and paid all my bills, and
Yeah.
there's always gonna be bills and property tax, which
Yeah.
is ridiculous. But at the end of the day, if I don't have to worry about food, whatever, what would I do?
Yeah.
And whatever that is that I would do is probably what I should do.
Yeah.
And I think that's where like a lot of people don't, because everyone's always worried about paying off everything or having everything
Billion
paid off.
percent.
It's like even if you pay everything off, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
You know, like there's a lot of times too, like it's kind of sucks to say this, but like as people get older, whatever race, whatever creed, whatever you are, as you get older, it's gonna be harder and harder to get employed by just a basic job. Okay,
Yeah.
and so
Trust
at
me,
the
I
end,
know.
at the end of the day, it's like I really want to inspire my kids to be entrepreneurs more so than anything else,
Yeah.
and fail miserably at 18 and 19 and 20. Do it.
Yeah.
Go for it. You want to start a boutique? I'll
Yeah.
help you in any way possible, right?
Yeah.
Let's go
Yeah.
for it. Whatever that dream is, go for it
Yeah.
right now. Don't go slave away for 20 plus years in a corporate
Yeah.
office. So like and a lot of people they're like, man, I didn't think about that. If there was that one thing I would do if I didn't have to worry about anything.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's their happiness. People always say like, well, you can't turn your happiness into business. Like, well, you can. Many
Yeah.
people have done it. It just takes the right mindset.
Yeah. It's definitely a mindset thing, which is why I think it has the intangibility, just like anything where you talk about the gym or dreams or that it takes the intangibility requires you to compensate with mindset and attitude basically.
Yeah.
Whereas, because I don't disrespect to gas station attendants, but most people don't quote unquote dream to work at a gas station.
Right.
So there's no mental obstacle to overcome to do it.
When everybody wants $15, $20 an hour now.
That too, yeah,
Even my
yeah.
kids are like, oh, I should be making like. I'm like,
Actually, I had a
no,
question
no.
for you. I'm going to flip the script and ask you this. So, what do you do, if you don't mind me asking, for your kids, where we live we live in a world where the what we see obviously online, Photoshop is one thing, but as far as what is all we are, and I'm guilty of letting it affect me, and I even Betty and I were actually talking about how there's a generation now that exists that doesn't know what it was like without the internet. So
Right.
that's almost like for me a weird place of like, wow, ignorance is bliss, because I long for that as much as I use it and pimp it out and all that, because I know the alternative. Whereas your kids were around after internet, like were any around
Yeah, like
pre-internet?
I didn't get my first cell phone until I was a senior in high school.
Yeah,
So,
so they're
you know,
so like,
so
what do you do with your kids, or your thoughts on ensuring, because the psychological damage, whether they're smart kids or dumb kids, but the constant beating of something, there's no way to not let it affect you, because it affects you, it affects me.
Yep.
We might have age, maturity, and relative. We have a reference point, or I have a
still
reference
addicting.
point pre-internet to like keep myself true. But if all they see are the successes, because that's all people show on the internet, is the good shit. And
Well,
how do you keep
but this is a
them?
good point. This
How
stuff's
do you keep
hard.
them honest,
Well, it's
or keep it not tamper their expectations, but so they don't go down that slippery slope of, oh, I'm not as successful as so and so overnight, so I suck.
well, and that's the thing is like I think, to be honest with you, I think this is kind of showing them way more than they probably ever knew.
Yeah.
Doing this stuff is not easy. I mean, I'm doing all this by myself and
Yeah.
doing an Instagram page and like it's a lot I'm doing right
Yeah.
now. And
And I love that. That's cool for
not this is not an easy. Anyone that says being a video game streamer or YouTuber or whatever is easy, it's not.
Yeah.
You have to learn the entire gambit of something, right? Like
Yeah.
I know, just like you, like I know so many people that do this, like they're editors, videographers, right? I have a videographer, one of my best friends. So if you ever want a red camera, come on down to Georgia, let's go. But but at the same time, like he has a job, I have a job, we're busy, we can't
Yeah.
always do the fun stuff all the time.
Yeah.
But like for instance, I'll tell you this: my youngest son, I told him, I said, hey, what do you want to do? None of even my kids, like when they leave, or like I've always asked them, what do you want to do? Like me coming out of high school, all I wanted to do was special forces. That was
Yeah.
it. There was no other thing ever other
Yeah.
than that. And so I was very purpose driven, right?
Yeah.
But then like seeing my kids, like they don't have that,
Yeah.
and I do think partially it's a failure of the school system, but it's also, as a parent, it's for you to instill what your kids are going to get from that internet. Like we were pretty strict on like, okay, no cell phone till 13.
Yeah.
No social media till like sophomore, junior
Yeah.
high school, right? So they did have a little bit of kind of babying in that regard, and like we put limits on the technology kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But like I asked my youngest son, I said, "What do you want to do?" And he's like, "Oh no," and he's really good at video games.
Yeah,
and loves
yeah.
playing video games. I said, "Well, let's stream. Why don't you if you're a freshman in high school, try and video game stream. You know, I said, we'll get you the equipment. I'll get you a microphone. I have a platform now.
Yeah.
You can start streaming, and it just there was never a drive to do it. But I think the hardest thing as a parent, what I realize with kids, is there's three phases to that. You know, your kids are infatuated with you
Hmm.
when it begins, right?
Yeah.
Then in the middle there, like you can do nothing right,
Yeah.
right? They won't listen to a single word you say. But then there's a third stage that eventually your kids are going to humble you
Yeah.
and they're going to
Okay.
teach you.
Yeah.
But right now we're in the phase with mine where it's all about nothing we do is right, and
Yeah.
they want to ignore everything we say.
Yeah.
I think for most parents, the hardest thing to do is letting them fail
Yeah.
and watching that kind of happen.
Yeah.
I
What
think that's
I
the
can't
hardest
fathom
thing.
being a parent in this day and age.
It is. It's difficult.
Because
It's
you
difficult.
like your competition, and I say it like this is obviously a huge social structure conversation, but the, back in the day, before the internet or before even communications were such that they are now, even if before landlines, let's say,
Yeah. Oh
your
my God,
tri-
landlines.
yeah, sorry, your tribe was much smaller. So, um, did did racism, like for example, this is really extreme, but like so if this pocket of people that would be quote unquote racist had never met the other race, would they have ever been racist because they were so pockets of isolation? So the more we've expanded into the world, that has allowed
More things
good
with the
good bad or
exposure.
indifferent to
Yeah.
be shoved in your tribe. And so your competition now, it exposes weakness, it could be racism, or it exposes openness to non-racism, or but it tests that tribe of, it was maybe 30 people. Now your kids, let's fast forward to where we're at now, you as father are competing with
Well, that's what I told my
30
kids.
million things on the internet.
Right. I told my kids this too. I said, you cannot worry about the world.
Yeah.
I said, you're never going to be able to affect the world.
Yeah.
So it's like I always tell my kids, dream big and shoot for your dreams, but there's always some ground at reality of like,
Yeah.
you know, you can never, there's certain things you can't end, you
Yeah.
know. So you're not here to worry about all the world's problems.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where, like you said, local tribes, right?
Yeah.
And this is very much getting away from nerd stuff, but this is another
We'll
passion of
circle
mine.
back. We'll circle
And
back. I'll
we
I'll find a way to.
we can start our own podcast talking about
Yeah.
this stuff because this is stuff I love talking about. But I think, but one of those things I would say too is people don't focus on their local communities,
Yeah.
and that's a big component to a lot of this stuff, right? Like I've met so many people on Instagram and do this kind of nerd culture piece
Yeah.
where we've kind of even created our own little community where we kind of help each other and talk,
Yeah.
share ideas and stuff.
Well, it's
It's
ironic.
really cool.
Through the
It's
world of
ironic.
such something
Yeah,
big, we're actually going back to smaller groups.
exactly.
Like
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
where.
and then we're doing spaces where we only listen to what we want to hear,
Yeah,
right?
well, that
And
okay. Here, I'll circle it back to nerd stuff.
that's what
I'll
happens,
bring it home. So yeah, that's where you had fans that were secret Star Wars fans. There wasn't the internet, and
right?
you would open up the news. This is definitely a dated thing, but like for when I went out to the prequels, I did the whole camp out thing, but I actually had to open up the paper. I had to call movie phone for the phone number to find out when the movie was being
Oh
done.
man, movie phone.
Yeah, yeah. You ain't lived until you've called movie phone and had to wait clear till the end to get the movie you're waiting for.
Yeah, in a
But
sleeping
like,
bag in a tent or out
yeah,
hot.
you would have but then you would have your pockets of people, and this is when Comic-Con was a couple hundred people. You could relate because it was like a physical social joining of like, oh, we're the same. But then that's
Right.
now extrapolate that to the internet. That's where now their toxic fandom comes in. When
Yeah.
like in reality, I think toxic fandom is a very interesting social examination of how, holy crap, we are
People care about something.
yeah, we should actually be an ally in our passion, even if our like the Zack Snyder thing for me is a huge example. Like I'm a blind follower of like because he just works for me,
I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not.
and but because we have, to me, the common denominator is the thing, not necessarily Snyder, but like we have this passionate overlying thing, but it's a huge irony in that the place where people, especially in the nerd culture, like it was like, oh, only nerds get me. Now nerds are fighting nerds. It's like, oh, no. You were tribes.
Yeah.
You were like part of the same tribe before. Like you were the elves. Don't start fighting like you're the dwarves.
Right, exactly.
Stay
Yeah.
like be different, but no, like you need each other. Like
Be
let's not
different but
fight.
civil. Okay.
Ex-
Cool.
Exactly.
Well, but it's a great point because like this whole toxic fandom and it's all
Yeah.
toxicity is what everybody labels it as, but it's really just passion, and like
Henry Cavill has an amazing answer on that.
oh, it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's fantastic, and also Tolkien has a great answer on that in an actual interview where he talked about canon. Canon's a narrative that goes throughout the story that holds to the root and the core of the story, right?
Hmm.
Then you have a Tolkien professor on Amazon Prime who's helping them do the show, and he says there is no canon in Tolkien. It's like, no, yes, there is.
Ugh.
I think so many people are breaking that cycle, and I think if you want to call it a disease, whatever you want to call it, I think what's happening and Hollywood's finally starting to recognize it after almost a decade of bad stuff.
Yeah.
You can't please every single person.
Yes.
You can't make a movie for every single audience.
Yeah.
And they would do these focus groups. I'm like, well, what focus group you getting? The one down the road in Burbank,
Yeah.
or are you getting people from different states or
Yeah.
different regions, right? I think that's where telling good stories is what we just all want, and I think that's what we need to focus on is those good stories. But the toxic fandom, I think nerdom is expected to grow even 300% more in the next
Yeah.
decade.
Yeah.
And hence me being a business person goes, oh,
Yeah.
but
Get on that wave.
but I think like Big Bang Theory, as much as people hate Big Bang Theory, I actually enjoy Big Bang Theory. As much as the laugh tracks are fake,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
there's some deep stories in there and some deep moments where like someone like Sheldon who's so closed off to the world and smart or whatever, right? And then eventually learns how to actually care for people.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big part of I think storytelling, especially in our generation. Um, we grew up with these movies, we grew up with these stories and these
Yeah.
comics and stuff, and we weren't afraid to kind of show these things in high school, maybe, yeah. But you notice like all these kids are in all this stuff, all the
And that's
parents
the
and all this
irony.
stuff.
Yeah. That this was a weird, unique, like no, I don't want to say taboo, but almost like a keep to yourself and only the one or other two people like you. And
Right.
now it's technically opened up where you can feel the alliances and the connections, and but with that floodgate of passion comes a floodgate of passion.
Exactly.
And that's where it leaks. And I won't bastardize Cavill's quote, but that's where he talks about, like, he says something like, I don't think they're toxic, I just think they're passionate.
Right.
And again, it goes back to my argument of art, subjectivity of art versus the objectivity of 2 plus 2 is 4. There's not a
Right.
lot of people that are passionately fighting about 2 plus 2 being 4. But as far as
There's a few, but
yeah, I mean, I'm sure. Yeah, with everything, I'm sure there's somebody.
there's
But when
always
it comes
somebody.
to something artistic, it's there's you. That's a you can't. I don't know. That floodgate, it's on or off.
Yeah.
Passion and fandom and all that is on. But then to circle back to what you just said with like the Hollywood thing, is it baffles me because. And we could go into the DC, the reign of the last DC people before Gunn, like this is actually, we're not in a pitchy d-bag Hollywood way, but this literally ties into this author who I'm pimping to, I have my own like personal reasons, but it also helps him too. But I want to play a character in his book if it goes to a show. And I'm baffled by this dude, for example, can have 20 or 30 books. Nerds can exist and have this giant fandom where
Right.
the audience is literally built to make a movie for these people, and
Yeah.
somehow Hollywood or the studios screw it up. And we call it in the military, I don't know if it's just a military thing
Fubar.
now, yeah, it's FUBAR, but also they have we called it the good idea fairy. It's like
Oh,
they're like, they just floats in and has a good idea, and it's like, no, 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 it was fine the first time. And it baffles me that like the whole focus group, when I saw, and I know I'm just circling back to like I'm preaching. This is literally preaching to the choir, being on your show. But Flashpoint Paradox versus the Flash, like they had a cartoon made.
oh,
Make
DC
make
cartoons,
yeah
DC
make
cartoons, DC movies.
yeah make that cartoon into a movie. You would have been fine. Like
Yeah.
you didn't have, and it baffles me that like, I pity I fully like support empathetically, sympathetically stuff you've written, like the stuff you told me you've written that's your IP, the stuff Scott writes, because it's literally IP, it's original ideas,
Right.
because those aren't getting seen through the let's re-release Ghostbusters 7. I mean, they're not going to be seen through the guaranteed blockbusters. Frustratingly, I don't know the answer. I wish I did. But at the same time, so it's like, okay, I can see why that's hard and all that. So studio's answer is, well, we want to get the most maximal, audience. It's like the internet exists.
Of course.
Google Batman support group. You have
Yeah,
you probably have like 600,000 people right there. If they just paid $1 for a ticket, you just
yeah.
made $600,000.
Or just look at all the channels on Reddit or Discord. There's people
Yeah,
that talk
like,
about
it's
this
just
all
bad.
the time.
They have access to focus groups, yet for some reason they keep not using them.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, you can't please everybody, but statistically, there are Reddit subgroups. You
Y-
could please those numbers, and they're probably bigger
Yeah. I
than
mean, to be
the
honest,
groups they're not.
I didn't read the Lord of the Rings books, but those movies brought me into that world, and I will say this and say it till the cows come home. Lord of the Rings is my favorite because of the movies.
Yeah, same.
Because of
Yeah,
those
and
two
I'm the
movies,
same
like
way.
it is my top kind of
Yeah,
fandom. There's not a lot to collect with Lord of the Rings,
yeah.
unfortunately. It's all really
But
expensive.
uh,
But,
I've heard though that obviously the books you couldn't make them long enough. Like the movies, just
um.
like they're way too long.
Oh well. So I'll speak to experience.
Yeah,
I'm reading all the books, but I'm not reading them. I'm listening to Andy Serkis narrate them, which is
I
incredible.
saw a thing with that. That is a
Um,
astonishing idea.
So I have Andy Serkis reading The Hobbit to me right now, and he does all the voices, which is incredible. But
Does
reading
the movies do the book, or do the books do the movie, or do the movies
so
do the books justice? Because I've heard.
so far, I'm about 70% of the way through The Hobbit, and like we have this show, Tales of the Ages, with one of the Lord of the Rings persons is in Italy and one's in Virginia,
Uh huh.
and they're both like no one can really talk to them about it, but it's I love listening to them talk when we do the podcast and stuff, right? And it's so good. But you should definitely listen. It's so great. But
Yeah.
I actually asked them. I said, I'm reading The Hobbit, and it seems pretty darn close to the movie. And they're like,
Yeah.
well, and because they know every little detail. So I
That's
would
the
say
thing.
they're the next level of the reader. Like they've
But the
read the books.
general audience, if they were to
They
grab the
don't
book,
at all. Yeah,
and that's
it's
I see. I
very.
think that's why the Lord of the Rings works, because it hit the sweet spot.
It did. It hit the
Is
sweet
is
spot.
it found the middle spot?
Yeah, like having Legolas be a new character, cool.
Yeah.
Having people in The Hobbit be new characters, cool. But they didn't change the actual story just because
Yeah.
other people are in it.
Yeah.
But I forgot where I was going with that. But basically, you
Oh,
get
the book
rushed.
versus the movie,
Yeah. So
and
the 8 hours for about a book,
yeah,
right? 8 to 14 hours, and I tell people this all the time. You're gonna have to cut something for the books. Harry Potter, they cut some. They cut
yeah,
some for the books, right?
or serialize it and turn it into an episodic show like uh, uh,
I'm actually
Rings of
against
Power.
TV shows now. I think they're destroying some of those long form stories.
Yeah, that's the thing is, they're ruining it, but they also
They understand
create.
how they can do it with money.
Yeah. Well, and it creates, and yeah. Only Rings of Power could screw up this argument I'm about to make, but like
$1 billion.
using this, I'm pimping it out, but like this book series, it's called The Borrowed World. You would have to turn 11 books into one 2-hour movie. It would do it a disservice.
Yeah.
Same as like The Walking Dead. If they took the graphic novels and turned it into one movie, maybe it would have worked. But if anybody who knew better, going, oh my God, there's like 15 characters you could have like. So it's.
Do you
But
think
the
it's
reliance
also,
on it has ruined the long form movie.
right?
Though.
Do you think it's also like what I've always learned in marketing everything too is the simple things done well,
Yeah.
right? There's something always to be said about that, and I actually do feel like even shows like The Acolyte, Ahsoka, Rings of Power, like they don't focus on the small things and the simple things. Like just do simple things well. And why do you have 10 seconds of like no dialogue whatsoever in silence? Like, come on, people. You know, um, and there's a natural evolution and a natural progression to movie telling and storytelling, right? All that stuff, the way
Yeah.
things are shot, everything. I still love the Matrix movies because it did so much for cinema, but also it was just such a cool story.
Yeah.
I know people hate the last two, but whatever.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings is the only trilogy that went like this.
Yeah. Yeah, they only
Um,
got better. And I would, well, no, Matrix is, I was going to say it's because they shot them all together, but Matrix was pretty much shot back to back too.
yeah,
But Lord of the Rings was so famously shot pretty much all at the same time. And
but
I'm wondering if they broke that up into like 2 or 3 years between films, if they would have suffered the same fate as most serial.
which is a really good point because like Peter Jackson was an unknown,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah. I just started watching The Frighteners. Have you seen that with Michael
Yeah,
J. Fox? I forgot that was his movie.
yeah.
So The Frighteners and The Lord of the Rings, that's all I know Peter Jackson for.
And then he did another one. I think it was a war movie, World War II movie. I forgot what it
Yeah.
was. But anyway, he was a chance. They took a chance on him. Like
Yeah,
I know for a long time the Halo creators were looking to do a Halo show, which the new Halo show was bad.
another one I didn't watch.
And so, oh, did you interview to do Master Chief?
I did not. I just
Uh,
knew this is a conversation we can tap onto after you finish your point of honoring the source material.
oh yeah,
And this, yeah, I had no reason because I didn't audition, but I was also like, Master Chief is 6'6", he's a big guy.
yeah.
So there's only
He
like
did.
3 people in LA that could have done it. I actually liked that actor until he justified taking the helmet off, and I was like, no, Pablo, I liked you.
Oh no, I did too. Pablo was great. His role in 13 Hours was like so perfect. Army
Yeah.
Ranger, and then in Den of Thieves, like
Yes. Oh, yeah. And Jonah thinks he crushed it. But
he
yeah,
crushed it.
when he started, and again, I don't want to ever be a hypocrite. So I want my friends to call me out, quote unquote, if and when I make it. I probably need to be more of a hippie and say when I make it.
Yeah,
But he was always kind of like more of a bad boy, less artsy fartsy, but could still act. He wasn't walking around like he's, God's gift to thespians, but he could act. Like he did his role well. But then when he got interviewed and justified fucking up the source material, I was like, you've gone D-bag actor on us. No. Like I got pissed. I was like, no, you go Henry Cavill on this and lose your job. Like,
yeah. I think more people should do that because I think there's so many instances where people take a chance. Like Neil Blomkamp, I think has made some great movies, like District 9,
yeah,
Elysium, and all these. They're just
yeah,
and then all of a sudden they bring him back to the Gran Turismo movie, which out of the blue I go watch. I'm like, holy crap, this is great.
yeah.
This was a great movie.
And you forget it's his. Yeah,
And you forget it was Neil Blomkamp, and you can
yeah,
tell like he shoots with visual effects in mind. And he shoots with, but
yeah,
I'm like, give this dude some stuff, man.
yeah, yeah. And that goes back to the I don't get it thing of okay, I get subtract our blind passions, so narrow it down to general audience. Like so that people that would pick up the extremes on the Lord of the Rings nuances. Okay,
Right.
subtract them to general audiences. I use this with war and military movies actually to not be a hypocrite. Okay, Black Hawk Down, 13 Hours or whatever, wasn't made for former CIA guys or soft guys or Rangers. Subtract those people in the audience. Make it for my mom or my dad or my friends that weren't in the military. Like narrow down the generic audience, and I still go, okay, how are people? Why is this so confusing to Hollywood? Why is it so confusing to honor go to the Reddits, hire Noel? I would say his name wrong. Like they literally have success. It's not like you're taking a risk and casting Ryan Reynolds after Green Lantern. Like that one, I could see the understanding. They're like, this might be a bad idea, but it's like, all right, well, he did good. Check. He did good. Check. He did good. Check.
Yeah, he did
But
good
we're
check.
still not going to make a movie. It's like, well, why are
Right.
you? It confuses the hell out of me because they keep saying, well, we're all about profit and it's got to be guaranteed income. I was like, okay, I don't know how many subreddit
There is
things.
there is no such thing as guaranteed income. I think people.
Yeah, but they're still searching for it. Is the
Yeah, they're still
problem?
searching for it. Yeah,
But
I
then
tell
like,
people I tell people this all the time. Even your full time job is a contract, temporary basis.
yeah,
You know.
and and I get that's where I get like all pissy. Partially as an actor, partially as a fan, partially as just a person that's sick of. I grew up being inspired by The Rock. Now I'm sick of seeing him in shows. Not as a whiny wannabe actor, but for some reason, casting still thinks he makes money, or he does, and they're still like, we're gonna beat this thing to the ground. And
they do.
and they do, and it's just like, as an actor, I'm like, if he would just take a couple years off and then come back with a badass, meaty like acting role, it'd be awesome. Like get that quote unquote resurgence or whatever. Like Josh Brolin, like he was nowhere, did some Avengers, and then he did that Outer Banks show, and had that one. Obviously, he comes from money and Hollywood parents, but it baffles me that Hollywood. I get they preach this thing, and I'm like, okay, I get if you're like evil genius must make profit, and I'm like, but why do you keep saying that's your rule yet doing
The
this?
opposite. Yeah.
like the opposite. Like the fact that Godzilla movie.
Godzilla -1, 25 million, and it made a bunch. Yeah.
Yes, that just goes to show. Or 28 years later, Homeboy's, even though he's probably got a lot of amazing things attached to that iPhone, the very fact he's shooting on an iPhone. I would love to shoot an iPhone movie with the budget he had. Let's not think his budget was thousands. It was still millions.
Right.
But it just goes to show. Why did we need? I keep quoting Mystic River for some reason. I'm on a Mystic River kick. Outside of those actors' salaries and maybe shooting in the town of Boston costing a fortune, I can't imagine that cost a lot of money, and it's
No.
an amazing movie.
Well,
Like,
like I mean, to be honest with you, I use iPhones. Like this is an
yeah,
iPhone. I bought two iPhones instead of buying a nice DSLR
yeah,
because the technology is so great. Like I'm shooting at 4K 60 frames per second.
yeah,
And if you know what you're doing with lighting and everything, you could
yeah,
do some cool stuff. And ironically, the iPhones shoot way better at night than the $100,000 cameras
yeah,
because of the algorithms and
yeah, because
software.
you need lighting.
Right.
Yeah, like I
So
loved that red, but the catch is I needed people around that were intimate with the red. Like I was
yeah.
like, I want to make this happen, and then two other people had to make
Well, but
make happen what I was talking.
that's what you and I know that most people don't. So essentially, let's see, Jeff's in frame now. Cool. What other lights are around? So like, if you want to shoot at night, and if you're shooting anything, anytime we would shoot inside of a house or something, right?
Yeah,
You're creating artificial sunlight, even though the sun's blasting outside, because you
yeah,
need to direct it right in that moment,
yeah,
right at the right time. So you have rigs and lights and wires going over the
yeah,
ceiling, because people don't remember like it's whatever's in frame, but
yeah.
there might be like three
If you
feet out.
pull out just a
Yeah,
little bit, you're like,
you'll
oh,
see
what a di-.
all the stuff
Yeah,
and all the lights and all the
yeah,
boom mics and
yeah.
all the cables and the floors
Well,
and
have you seen
dollies.
there's like an Instagram or a meme or something that has a close up of a shot in a film? It's just like a pretty lady in a hat walking with another pretty lady in a hat, like in front of a storefront, basically.
Yeah,
And then they pull out and show, they're like, why does this? And they show the close up need this, and they pull out, and they've got the street blocked off with police. They've got the giant
yeah,
sunshade, like more money than I've probably spent on that Reacher thing in 1 5-second shot, And I'm like, you see why they need it, but at the same time, do they need it? Need it? Like,
yeah. But well, because I've seen like that's how I would always judge photographers that come and do on set. Because what we would always try and do is you try and get your photographer in on your shoot days because you
yeah,
have everybody there. Well, what I noticed is when the photographer came with like 5 or 6 lights, I'm like, this dude, no, not gonna work.
yeah,
But
because he's gonna think he needs to use it.
when they came with one, I was like, they
Yeah,
got it.
yeah,
And then what I noticed is we would hire photographers to come on set and do the photography while filming and shooting. Because some say no, like old school photographers say no, I don't want to work with videographers. But
yeah.
videography light with the right cameras and just you adding some kind of soft or whatever
Should be the
highlight
same.
light,
Yep.
you got this right.
Yeah,
And so it's just interesting you said that because I had the same kind of philosophy when people would show up on set. I'm like, oh, they hired the wrong photographer. I'm
yeah,
like, this is
yeah,
not gonna happen. Like
yeah,
one time we had a whole crane system with some old vintage
yeah,
cars. We had this whole shoot for this really high end furniture company, right? And we had the guy coming up, and I was like, we literally rented this crane for this one shot.
yeah. It's
You
stupid.
know,
Yeah, I
like
did the same thing. Yeah,
this one shot, we had
yeah,
this big boom crane. We had like
yeah,
an hour of setup to prep for this one scene, and all we did was just this nice.
yeah. And then you argue, and not because I'm a hypocrite on this, but then you argue. I use this for Scott and I's film Noon, where we pulled out a lot of stops, but I literally said in the behind the scenes footage one time of, is my mom gonna know we shot this on a crane or that we rigged? Like, is she gonna pause in the middle of the show and go, if they did a crane or a jib move on this shot, it would have sold me more.
It would have made it way better.
She wouldn't even have thought to. Yeah, she wouldn't know. So either you do the wrong thing well or the good thing well, and just that's that.
I think it's just
and,
the simple things, right? The simple things well.
yeah, well, think about, back in, we can go back to Indiana Jones and all that. The amount of stuff that they didn't have tool. I mean, that's part of the reason, like you said, if the photographer brings, 7 lights, they're relying on lights and they're going to use them because they have them. I
Right.
don't care what gear. I almost said a phrase that's a little outdated.
Sometimes they like to show out. Right?
Yeah, well, that's the thing
Yeah.
I don't care if you're a car guy, any sort of hobby that has toys, gear, or equipment, the more you have, the more you're going to use.
Oh yeah.
Whereas the less you have, I mean, you could go into guns, you can go into deployment. Like, yeah, like it's a tried and true, especially it's a very dude thing. I'm horrendously guilty.
No,
Like,
it is
I want as many
100%.
toys and gear as possible. But most of the time I've been broke and I'm like, wow, I can do a lot with bare minimum.
Yeah.
And just because that good idea fairy comes in and says, I'm going to need a crane for this shot, it's like, and that's actually why I love working. Like, this is not to pimp out anything with Scott, but that's why I love working with Scott, is because he has a formal training and he's like my antithesis as far as like optimism and like, we got this, bro. And I'm just kind of like the workhorse, and he will know how to get, like you said, what's just in that shot, polish that turd, and what's happening out here is just
Bluff.
gross chaos.
Yep.
And it's all that, like, this isn't a great setup, but if I pulled out, I'm jammed in a hallway Like I have barely any room to move right now, and it's because of lights and trickery, and that's all
Yep.
and some of the most cool things I've done, and you've done it, sound for sure, has been the times where your budget's the lowest, the time schedule's the shortest, and the shortcuts are the biggest, and like that Reacher thing, I keep quoting it like it's like I don't want to be that the high school quarterback that talks about his high school football game, but all I have is that Reacher thing because that was the only thing I put so much time and money into. So that's my reference point. That was all out of my pocket. It wasn't like Warner Brothers.
And then they went with Roy Boy and Reacher. So
I see.
um,
I mean, again, that's a whole other
you see
conversation.
why they did. I get it.
Well,
But
actually, no, I don't because here's why I'm
I don't
pissed on
either.
that. I was a fan of the books long before the show, before the
Yeah,
auditions. Like
Reacher's
I've been
always.
reading.
I mean, and then there was the Tom Cruise Reacher, which was
Yeah, and I was a Reacher book reader in the military, like long before I even thought I'd chase Hollywood. So yeah, when they cast Cruise, I was like, this in the books, they no joke say he's 6'6".
Yep.
I was like, so I was like just pissed as a book reader. But then in the books, they actually say the character. If you don't read the books, this is me being a little juvenile. In the books, they talk about Reacher makes fun of roided out bodybuilders. Like it's a plot point in multiple books that he makes fun of juiced out, shredded, veiny bodybuilder dudes. He's farm big, like he's Georgia farm big, like
Yep.
and so like
Corn,
that I'm like
we call him,
honor the source material.
they call him corn fed. Yeah.
Yeah, he's corn fed, and so like yeah, I get really hostile on that. So but yeah, so the Reacher thing.
He's literally a roided
Yeah.
up dude.
Well, and then in the next season, this is me being a little whiny brat about it. The character that if you've seen it online, the big bad guy for season 3 has to be bigger than him, and
Right.
the book is written that way. It's based on the Persuader, and I actually auditioned for this character. But when I got the audition, he's the main bad guy of season 3. When I got the audition, I was like, the name's Polly. I'm like, I was reading it and I messaged and it's not like I was going to work my way out of an audition, but I was like, I'm not getting this because I know this character has to actually be bigger than Reacher. That's the plot of that book, is that this guy makes Reacher look small. And I was like, because Roid Boy is giant, I'm going to have to be 500 pounds. I was like, I told my manager, I was like, I'm not going to get, if they're honoring the script, there is no way in hell my skinny ass pseudo dad bod is getting this job. And the guy they cast is some behemoth world, what are they, world's strongest man.
Wait, wasn't it the guy named Thor? His name is actually Thor.
I think his name is something like that. It's very Nordic, and he is giant. And I was like, well, that explains it.
Funny because we see that same Roid Boy in a movie directly with Henry Cavill, side by side comparison, right?
Oh yeah.
And that was actually a really good movie.
I want to see it, but because your guy's in it, I don't want to watch it because I really love Henry Cavill.
Yeah, so and it's funny, but I think that's a big point, But I guess to kind of wrap this one up here just a little bit, we could do more. Trust me, I'm totally game to do more. If you could give any advice to people out there that maybe struggle with this kind of stuff, like I know being a nerd, suppressing things or whatever, right?
Yeah.
If you could just give any advice to people out there that you would want to give, just give them any advice you want,
Well, yeah. It's funny as we've aged, and I've aged for sure, and experienced the things. I'm going somewhere with this. I know you have a life and things to do. I remember Facebook memories will populate some stuff sometimes. When I first moved to LA, and I was so motivated, these things will come up. I'm like, shut up, dude. Oh my God, you're so hyper happy and motivated. But nothing I said was technically wrong. I just was in the right headspace to be like almost ignorantly motivated. Like there's a sweet spot of like dumb ignorant and just like ignoring obstacles. Like and I try to always liken it back to the Green Beret thing, not as a bro, but because that was like more of a tangible thing that I had. If I passed, I became a Green Beret. It was pretty black and white. There's no like, if I pass Hollywood tryouts, I'll have a career. So I always reference the Green Beret thing, but so like there were obstacles. I could be in a bad mood, but as long as I achieved X, I would get Y. It was kind of black and white. So it's easier to be in a good headspace when you can kind of have a tangible thing. So I always I see those Facebook memories and I'm like, oh my God, I roll my eyes because I'm like, oh, that advice is bullcrap, or whatever. But I believed it and I was practicing it. And now my advice I give is more of a little dose of my own medicine. Like, I need to follow this advice. So it's more like this isn't my advice that I'm currently practicing. It's the advice I would give somebody, including myself, because I'm actually struggling with the reception of the advice. That's a long disclaimer to the following advice. um, I've never actually answered this in this last 5 or 10 years. And this is not to be a downer, but because of the whole just got cancer and supposedly I might be okay after all the cancer surgery I had, I've had that proverbial, oh shit, I may die. I'm realizing there's a lot of weight to my advice would be I'm realizing there's a lot of weight to what matters, and as much as that's a very grand statement, that actually can be, I think, universally and acutely applicable to everything. I'm not saying I'm really bad at one of the pieces of advice you touched on of like, if you didn't have any money, what would you do to do that tomorrow? Because I believe that at my first level of hippiness. My second level is like, well, I want to go to Alaska. And I go, well, I can't because that requires the money you said to ignore. So I get down that rabbit hole of shitting
Yeah.
on of shitting on what is really actually advice I agree with. Yet I have an initial demon that goes, no, let's talk to logistics, So with that being said, my advice is the shit that really matters, and actually putting weight to it as far as because life is short, and I hate when people are like, I have cancer, now I look at life in a completely new light. It's like, no, I still have a cell phone bill to pay tomorrow. Just because I had cancer doesn't mean all of a sudden I'm like enlightened. But more with age, not the bullcrap cancer stuff, I more realize there is nothing wrong about doing what you want as long as you're not like malicious or stabbing people in the back. And if that's being a nerd, if that's chasing a Green Beret, if that's not chasing a Green Beret, if that's having a family, I think we live in a society where there's a weird judgment on things that are perceived as selfish that truly aren't selfish. And this comes from a dark attitude, but I think it's still applicable. It's like, at the end of the day, who's going to be at your graveside? C. Fletcher says something about that, and like in a place full of graves or something, I'm going to bastardize it, but really, who's going to be there? Your loved ones. So like, truly, those outside of your very immediate tribe, my mom, my dad, my sister Betty, who gives a or who do you give a shit about? And is my mom think I'm being selfish chasing my dream? She's concerned. She's like, I just wish my son wanted to be a teacher. Like but she doesn't like think I'm a piece of crap. She's sad I've
Right.
chosen like sometimes I chose to be broke because I was chasing Hollywood dreams, so I couldn't actually see him for like holidays. But because I was being true to myself and doing what I love and trying to do what I love, she got it. So it's kind of like, my advice, I'm really dancing around it, is really know who and what matters and screw the rest, and don't let that waver. And I think that'll keep you in the logistical headspace, successful as I am, and more in the hippie headspace that I wish I was in better. I think that advice applies to both, because I hate getting advice from people or hearing advice from people that are like super rich and they're like, money doesn't matter. And it's like, well, you say that, but that's easy for you to say because you're this,
Right.
So I hate advice that is very is like very audience specific, or one of my big ones that I'm trying to say the antithesis of is when people say, like The Rock actually has said this, is like, well, I wish I would have spent more time with my family. It's like, well, one could argue if you did spend time with your family and prioritized your family over your career, you wouldn't be where you are. I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
the good
Good or bad.
decision, but I want advice that matters to the stay-at-home mom, the dream-chasing Green Beret, the dream-chasing filmmakers, or whatever. And I think at the end of the day is it's a moving target, but that moving target is always, there is nothing wrong with taking care of yourself first. Like, one of my biggest important tattoos there's a metaphor of putting your oxygen mask on first. Like, I literally
Yep.
have the angel of death carrying the oxygen mask on his I always say it wrong, scythe. I can't remember the word. And that's to remind me to put your oxygen mask on first, because you're going to be useless. And this circles back to what you're saying about being positive. If you're doing what you love, putting your oxygen mask on first, you're going to treat your wife better because you're in a better mood. And if playing games all day pays your bills, makes you happy, and treats her better, F the rest, you know?
Yep.
And now that's what I'm saying is the part I'm bad at is I wasn't that way for like the first 8-9 years of the Hollywood pursuit. I was like only cared about getting discovered or making it or getting an audition, and it came at a cost of my happiness for sure. And as a result, I treated my friends bad, or my family, tons of ex-girlfriends. And yeah, so like I wish I would have done more about the whole there's nothing wrong with being selfish and doing what takes care of you first, because at the end of the day, I could be a pissy, angry a-hole, and I wouldn't want to be around me, like as Betty, if I'm in a bad mood because I didn't get my dream success, you know.
Right.
So that wasn't succinct, but if anybody can extrapolate from that, that would be my advice.
Yeah.
Turn
No,
on the
it's really
closed
good.
captions and have AI translate that for you.
No, that's really good. Really good advice.
Yeah.
And with that, I guess we'll end on that, man, because that's good.
Yeah, I'm all hot and sweaty, so we got to call it a day.
Yeah. Until next time.
Thanks, buddy.
Let's play.